Even a franchise as wildly successful as Pokémon is bound to have its fair share of fails, and lucky for us, some of them are pretty funny. So here are 50 epic fails in Pokémon. Blossom, as well as the rest of its family, cannot be found in the Alola region in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and have to be transferred in via Pokemon Bank, even though Blossom is a literal hula dancer and Alola is based on Hawaii. On that note, Solrock and Lunatone are also not available in Sun and Moon without transferring either, despite literally being Sun and Moon Pokemon. The Pokemon Yamask is entirely unobtainable in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and its DLCs, even though one of its DLCs is all about masks and the other DLC is set in Unova, where Yamask is from. I guess Game Freak don't really like putting Pokemon into games that they're literally perfect for. Another fail from Scarlet and Violet is that the ability Sharpness was introduced in these games, and its effect is that it powers up slicing moves. Meanwhile, Ceruledge and Kingambit were also introduced in this generation, and are Pokemon whose bodies are literally comprised of swords and can also learn multiple slicing moves, and neither of them were given Sharpness as an ability. On a similar note, Cranidos and Rampardos do not have the ability Rockhead, even though they are rock types whose designs center around their heads and how tough their heads are. Cranidos even has a dex entry that says its head is rock hard. Additionally, the names of the rock type and the rock head ability are also the exact same in Japanese as they are in English, so this isn't a translation quirk either, it's just a fail. And this kind of thing is apparently rampant in Pokemon because Rillaboom does not have Gorilla Tactics as an ability, even though it is a gorilla, and this ability was introduced in Generation 8, just like Rillaboom was. Next, let's go ahead and change gears a little bit and focus on the anime for a second, because the anime has a ton of epic fails as well. First up, in the episode Regaining the Home Advantage from the Diamond and Pearl series, this happens. And yeah, that's pretty much all that needs to be said. Meanwhile, in the episode A Parent Trapped, Crobat is completely messed up as its body colors are reversed, and it's colored much more like its pre-evolutions instead. It's not super uncommon for there to be the occasional coloring error in the anime, but this one is pretty bad even by those standards. And speaking of the Zubat line, the anime actually had a big fail before the first episode of it even technically began, as in the original opening, Zubat is shown to be carrying Squirtle, when it literally has no arms or legs to carry it with, which is a pretty big mistake. In the episode The Fourth Round Rumble from the original series, Officer Jenny commands her Growlithe to use Flamethrower, but she actually calls it an Arcanine instead. Excuse me, officer, do you need glasses? Officer Jenny isn't the only one that's messing up though, as in the episode Love Pokemon Style, Ash is taking part in a battle with his Squirtle and Totodile, and Brock remarks how Ash's water types are weak against fire types, which, yeah, is just not right at all. These kinds of errors even extend into the Pokérap as well, where Poliwrath is not exactly Poliwrath, and Graveler isn't looking too much like Graveler either. On the flip side though, one thing that is definitely not an epic fail is today's sponsor, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. These yummy subscription boxes bring you treats straight from Japan every month. And while all the boxes are great, I would have to say that these month's boxes are probably the boxes to get if I had to choose, because they're fall and Halloween themed, which really brings out the best in these goodies. Tokyo Treat has got some amazing stuff like this Danish, which was pretty delicious, and even apple pie flavored Kit Kats. Like, did you hear what I said? Apple pie flavored Kit Kats. Meanwhile, Sakura Co. is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box who is focusing on the autumn side of the season, and it is very, very autumn themed, which makes for some amazing snacks. You also get an authentic Japanese teacup in this month's box as well, so it definitely doesn't disappoint. And the best part is, you can get $5 off your first box of either of these options when you use the link in the description and code HOOPS at checkout, which not only gets you some amazing treats with a sweet deal, but it also directly supports the channel, which is really great and appreciated too. So be sure to give that a look with the link in the description, and a big thank you to Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. for supporting the channel. Let's go ahead and get back to some blunders in the games though. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, there is a pretty big fail in the end credits, where for a split second, you can see a mouse cursor moving across the screen. I don't know whether or not this ended up getting patched out, but yeah, it was a pretty big fail. Inexplicably, Alomomola can't learn Water Gun. First, it doesn't evolve from Love Disc, and now it can't learn Water Gun. This Pokemon couldn't have fumbled the bag any harder if it tried. One thing I can say in Alomomola's defense though, is that at least it's not alone in this regard. For example, Hypno and Drowsy, despite being the Dream Eater Pokemon, could not learn Dream Eater by level up until Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. What's quite possibly worse than this though is that immediately after the Let's Go games, these Pokemon went right back to not being able to learn Dream Eater by level up. I don't think this could make less sense if it tried. A similar case has to do with Ghastly, as it could not learn Poison Gas, despite being a Poison-type Pokemon that is known as the Gas Pokemon, until the Let's Go games as well. It then was unable to learn this move once again until Legends Arceus, and then after Legends Arceus, it went back once again to not being able to learn it in Scarlet and Violet, which is probably even worse than the Drowsy situation, to be completely honest. Meanwhile, Ampharos cannot learn Tail Glow, despite being known as the Light Pokemon, having a tail that glows, and that glowing tail being used as a specific plot point within the story of the Johto games, with it obviously being used to light the Olivine Lighthouse. Rhyhorn is specifically mentioned in the Pokedex multiple times to know Tackle, with the move itself being specifically referred to by name, as the word Tackle in its Pokedex entries is capitalized. Despite this, however, Rhyhorn could not actually learn Tackle at the time that its Pokedex entries were making this claim. To make it even worse though, Rhyhorn was given a dex entry in Sword and Shield that simply refers to more generic tackling, and not the move specifically, even though Sword and Shield were the games where it was actually given the ability to finally learn Tackle, and therefore is when its previous dex entries would have finally been accurate. Grimer and Muck do not have the ability Liquid Ooze, despite literally being Liquid Ooze. The ability's description states that the strong stench of the Pokemon's oozed liquid damages attackers that use HP draining moves. And one of Muck's dex entries states that from Muck's body seeps a foul fluid that gives off a nose-bendingly horrible stench. But yeah, no, this Pokemon probably should not have Liquid Ooze, because it's just definitely not applicable. On a note about poison though, in Pokemon Colosseum, if one of your Pokemon faints due to poisoning and you use an item to revive it, your Pokemon will still be poisoned. I don't know if this is more of a fail for the game itself or for the player, but either way, it kind of feels like a slap in the face. And speaking of a slap in the face, Aegislash, the Sword and Shield Pokemon, became the first Pokemon to ever have its base stat total lowered in Pokemon Sword and Shield. They did not have to do him like that. Let's go ahead and shift gears again back to the anime though, and now I am going to discuss what is probably the biggest fail that the anime has ever had to this point, other than maybe a certain incident. And that would be the Trainer's Choice segment. This was a thing that took the place of Who's That Pokemon during the Ruby and Sapphire arc, and it was genuinely just so bad, as it was absolutely littered with tons of huge errors. For starters, there was the claim that Arbok evolved into Seviper, which is just a big ol' capital L, but there were tons of other bad mistakes too. For instance, on this one, they tried to say that Combuskin is the best Pokemon of the ones available here to battle against Meditite, when it is literally weak to Meditite's Psychic type. Also, I don't know about you, but that is a pretty weird looking Nuzleaf. The people over at 4Kids who produced the anime at the time clearly needed to actually play a Pokemon game, because they also tried to do the same thing again and say that Combuskin would be the best Pokemon of the ones available here to battle against Kirlia, when once again Combuskin is literally weak to Kirlia's Psychic type. Even the most basic of Pokemon type matchups couldn't avoid being messed up, as this particular segment tried to say that Camerupt would be the best choice of the Pokemon presented to take on Ludicolo, even though it's not just weak to water, it is quad weak to water, making it an absolute horrible choice to use against this Pokemon. They also tried to say in this segment that Exploud would be the best option here to go against Tyrogue, which, other than it being a fully evolved Pokemon, is wrong because Tyrogue has the type advantage against Exploud's normal type. Also, I must say once again that that is a weird looking Nuzleaf, so this one is a double capital L. They also just did not care at all when it came to getting Pokemon's names right in this segment, if you couldn't already tell, because, for example, in this particular segment, Onix was misspelled with a Y in its name instead of an I. In this segment, Flaffy's name was misspelled with only one F instead of two towards the end of its name, and they misspelled it in this segment too, and they also misspelled it in this segment too. They couldn't even get Fortress's name right in this particular segment either, and to add insult to injury, they claimed that the Poison-type Seviper would be the best Pokemon of the ones presented here to go against Fortress, when Fortress is literally immune to the Poison type. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, this segment was a total train wreck. And it's not even a train wreck that's done either. After all of that, this is still an in-progress train wreck, because this segment tried to say that Makuhita was the best choice of the ones presented here to battle against Spoink. Like, seriously guys, for the love of Arceus, take just a second and learn that Psychic is strong against the fighting type. Please. It looks like I spoke too soon, because in this segment it was claimed that of the Pokemon listed, Teddiursa is the Pokemon who would last the longest against a Psychic-type attack, even though Poochyena is entirely immune to Psychic-type moves. This next one might be just as bad as that whole Psychic-type debacle though, as it asked what Pokemon would be the most effective against Plusle and Minun, and then proceeded to claim that the correct choice is Mudkip, who is the only one of these three Pokemon who is actually weak to Plusle and Minun instead. even when they get these segments right, they actually also just get them wrong, because in this segment, they claimed that Dugong would be the best option here to go against Ninjask, and even though it does actually have a type advantage against it this time, Nosepass is actually the better choice because it resists Ninjask's flying type, and Ninjask is also quad weak to Nosepass's rock type. So yeah, like I said, the Trainer's Choice segment is an absolute train wreck and is undoubtedly one of the biggest Pokemon fails of all time. Next up, going back to the games, we've got a few developer fails. First up, in Pokemon Legends Arceus, the game will actually crash if you try to use Shadow Force with a shiny Origin Form Giratina. This is due to Giratina using special animations when using this move in its origin form, which were just straight up not programmed for its shiny form, which would result in the game crashing if you tried to use the move. I don't know if this one has since been patched out or not, but it's a pretty big mistake regardless. And speaking of Giratina, in Platinum, you can battle this black belt on Victory Road, who will have this garbled up defeat text upon defeating him in a battle. While not necessarily a developer error, what is quite possibly one of the biggest fails that you could inflict on yourself in a Pokemon game has to do with a soft lock that you can enact in the Sinnoh games as well. It would be pretty hard to do this by accident, but if you go to Route 226, there is a small island where you can trade a Finneon for a Magikarp. If Finneon happened to be the only Pokemon in your party who could surf, and you didn't have any Pokemon who could fly or teleport either, and you didn't have a fishing rod or the ability to level up the Magikarp that you just got on a trade with rare candies, you would end up stuck on this island with no way of returning to the mainland whatsoever. So if you ever happen to do this by accident somehow, you would have committed one of the biggest possible fails in Pokemon history, to the point where it actually would be kinda impressive. It is also possible to softlock your game in the original Red and Blue before you even truly begin the game if you happen to evolve your starter Pokemon before delivering Oak's parcel and receiving the Pokédex. If you do this, you will not be able to continue with the game because the evolved Pokemon makes the game think that you already have the Pokédex, since you've technically registered a second Pokemon, and therefore Oak will not give you the Pokédex because he thinks you already have it, and therefore the roadblock in Viridian City will never lift. Unlike the previous one, this one is a bit of a fail on the developer's part, because even though it is pretty unlikely to happen, this can totally be achieved through normal gameplay, so it would also be dangerously easy for some random person to stumble upon, even though they technically didn't do anything wrong. Another way you can softlock yourself in these games happens in the Japanese versions, where if you completely fill up your party and your PC box before going to the old man for the catching tutorial in Viridian City, your completely full party and box will return a full box message when the man tries to select a Pokeball in the bag to show you how to catch a Pokemon, creating an infinite loop of the old man being unable to successfully select a Pokeball. On that note, however, let's go back to some Pokemon fails. For instance, Revavroom, the Pokemon who is based on a car engine, does not have access to the ability Motor Drive. In a somewhat similar case, the ability Strong Jaw was introduced in Generation 6, the same time that Mega Glalie was also introduced, who is essentially one big floating pair of jaws, and yet Mega Glalie does not have access to this ability. However, there might actually be a reason why this is the case, and it is extremely dark. According to the Pokédex, all of the energy pouring into Glalie's body from Mega Evolving actually breaks its jaw, so it's not exactly a strong jaw anymore, which technically makes it accurate for it to not have this ability, even though that's extremely morbid. Mawile also does not have Strong Jaw as its ability, despite its whole design literally being about the giant mouth on the back of its head, and in its Mega Evolution, where it can get a new ability, it gained a second giant mouth on the back of its head as well, and still did not get access to Strong Jaw. Meanwhile, on the move front, Pinsir cannot learn the move Mega Horn in any capacity, despite it being a Bug-type move, and Pinsir being a Bug-type Pokemon with 2 huge horns on its head. For good measure, there are also tons of non-Bug types who can learn this move as well, but yeah, not Pinsir, not a good fit, doesn't make any sense. Chansey cannot learn the move Soft Boiled by Level Up in Generation 1, despite it quite obviously being its signature move. Additionally, Soft Boiled is actually a TM in Generation 1, but only Chansey can learn that TM, with the exception of Mew, who can obviously learn every move. Meaning that Chansey actually had to be taught its own signature move by TM in Generation 1. As much as I hate to say it, the entire Ice type is kind of one big epic fail too. The fact that it does not resist types like Grass, Bug, or even Water is absolutely ridiculous, and it's also pretty crazy that Water resists Ice, when Ice quite literally freezes Water. So if anything, I feel like it should be the other way around. The Ice type is just treated totally unfairly, and it needs to get some changes made to it to balance it out and have it actually make sense. Next up, we've got some questionable pieces of advice from Professor Oak via some old strategy guides. Now, for full disclosure, while these are real things from actual guidebooks, there is also some reason to believe that some of these kinds of things that you see floating around online are also fake, but I wasn't able to verify 100% which ones were fake and which were the real deal, and while I did do my best to make sure that I only grabbed the real ones for this video, just keep that in mind as I go over these. First up, we've got one that says, Pidgeot and Fearo's Mirror move is cool. When facing a fearsome Dragonite who uses Hyper Beam, use Mirror move. You'll hit the Pokemon with its own attack. Good on Dragonite, as Dragon attacks are super effective against this fiery fiend. Not a bad strategy overall, except that Hyper Beam is not a Dragon-type attack. Professor, hold this L. Conserve moves. If your enemy only has a small amount of energy left, don't waste a powerful move like Swift. Is this guy even really a professor at all? There are 5 hidden machines in Pokemon, and they can be used both in battle and to help you solve puzzles. Careful though, when a Pokemon uses a hidden machine, the beast can never unlearn the skill it contains. Only teach them to your fave fighters. Well, alright, Professor Oak knows best. I guess I'll go teach my Mewtwo Flash and Cut. And finally, this next thing isn't from Professor Oak, but rather from the instruction manual of Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, where it says that there are rare Pokemon in the games that you'll only have the chance to catch once, and that they will never appear again after that. While also proceeding to show off one of the most common Pokemon in the entire games right next to this message. If only they knew what Zubat would become. So those were 50 epic fails in Pokemon, but which one do you think is the most ridiculous of the bunch? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll see you all soon with another new video, and until then, as always, thanks so much for watching, and I will smell you guys later.